At 2:47 p.m., a Ukrainian attack helicopter did something that violated every rule of combat aviation. It flew straight into the engagement zone of a Russian missile team, low and slow, practically begging to be shot down. The Russians couldn't believe their luck. An Mi-24 Hind loaded with rockets, exposing itself in broad daylight over a quiet sector. It made no tactical sense, unless the Ukrainians wanted them to fire. The helicopter's approach over this quiet sector of the front raises immediate questions. Oleshki has seen minimal activity for months, mostly limited to drone warfare and sporadic artillery exchanges. Yet here, a valuable Mi-24 gunship loaded with 4 B-8V rocket pods crosses into contested airspace at a dangerously low altitude. On board, each pod you see here carries 20 S-8 rockets, giving the aircraft a total of 80 unguided projectiles. These 80mm rockets weigh 11.7 kilograms each and pack a 1.1 kilogram warhead capable of penetrating 400 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. But a helicopter loaded down with this much ordnance here is like an NFL player showing up to a Pee-wee football game. It doesn't make any sense. At least it doesn't to the Russians, and that's all that matters. A Russian Manpads team positioned in a building approximately 3.2 kilometers away has been tracking their approach through binoculars for the past 4 minutes. The two-man team operates a 9K-38 Igla surface-to-air missile system, one of Russia's most capable man-portable air defense weapons. The system weighs 17.9 kilograms when ready to fire, with its 1.5-meter-long missile carrying a 1.17-kilogram warhead containing 390 grams of high explosive, more than enough to turn this helo into scrap metal. But the explosives aren't the thing the pilots have to worry about. It is this. Here in the nose, the 9M39 missile's cooled infrared seeker head represents a magnificent advancement over earlier models, using nitrogen cooling to reduce sensor noise and increase detection range. This cooling system allows the seeker to differentiate between aircraft exhaust and basic flares, at least in theory. And here is where things get interesting. The pilot rolls into his attack dive and unleashes all 80 rockets in a devastating ripple-fire sequence. The rockets streak toward the ground at 610 meters per second, spreading across a 500-meter-wide impact zone. But something seems wrong with this attack. Many rockets splash harmlessly into the Dnipro River. Others impact empty fields, sending up geysers of mud and debris. Only a handful strike actual structures. This appears to be area suppression rather than precision targeting, a seemingly wasteful use of munitions in a quiet sector. But this 500-meter spread pattern serves a dual purpose that the Russians don't recognize. Not only does it suppress a wide area, but more importantly, it creates the perfect conditions to force an air defense response. Any Manpads team watching this sloppy attack would feel compelled to engage what appears to be an easy target. The Russian Manpads team follows their training manual to the letter. Soviet-era doctrine mandates immediate engagement of any aircraft within the Igla's 5.2-kilometer operational range. The gunner checks his weapon's parameters one final time. The Ilga can engage targets at speeds up to 800 meters per second at altitudes up to 3.5 kilometers. The Ukrainian helicopter, flying low and slow during its attack run, is well within range. The gunner aims northeast, an angle that reveals something crucial. The helicopter has deliberately crossed into occupied territory. The Igla's 5.2-kilometer range can't even reach across the Dnipro from this position, meaning the Ukrainians are taking extraordinary risks to ensure the Russians take the bait. What the Russian team fails to consider is why a Ukrainian helicopter would expose itself so brazenly in broad daylight over a sector with known air defense coverage. The Oleshki area offers little strategic value, minimal troop concentrations, and no critical infrastructure requiring immediate suppression. The helicopter's route even suggests it may have crossed the Dnipro River into occupied airspace, as the Ilga's 5.2-kilometer range doesn't extend across the water from the Russian position.
The war in Ukraine has been full of dramatic encounters, but few are as intense, cinematic, and game-changing as the moment when Russian ground forces challenged a Ukrainian helicopter unit and immediately realized their mistake. This wasn't just another skirmish, it was a lesson in modern warfare, in courage, in technology, and in the will of a nation to fight back against a larger enemy. Opening scene: a sky filled with tension. It was a foggy morning on the Ukrainian front lines. The fields were damp, the trees swayed in the wind, and the silence of dawn was interrupted only by the faint humming of engines in the distance. But this wasn't ordinary machinery. It was the sound of rotor blades cutting through the cold air. The Ukrainian Mi-8 and Mi-24 helicopters were lifting off from their forward base, carrying supplies, missiles, and most importantly, hope. Pilots in their cockpits adjusted their visors. Each man knew what lay ahead: Russian positions, fortified with armored vehicles, anti-air defenses, and troops waiting for a fight. But none of them hesitated. These weren't just pilots, they were guardians of the sky. Russia's challenge in the ground. Russian forces had been monitoring Ukrainian air movements closely. Their radar units picked up signals of helicopters moving near the contested zone. Orders came quickly: engage the targets. Do not let them pass. Russian anti-air missile batteries prepared to lock on. Armored vehicles armed their machine guns. Infantry units took positions, scanning the skies for a glimpse of the incoming helicopters. They thought they had the upper hand. After all, helicopters are vulnerable to modern anti-aircraft weapons. In Russia's mind, this would be an easy victory, a chance to humiliate Ukraine and prove dominance. But they underestimated one thing: the skill, tactics, and resilience of Ukrainian pilots who had been fighting since day one of this war. The encounters: the Ukrainian helicopters approached the zone. They immediately detected hostile activity. Warning lights blinked inside the cockpit, signaling enemy radar locks. The pilots knew what this meant. Russian forces were preparing to fire, but retreat was not an option. The lead pilot, call sign Falcon, calmly instructed his squadron: stay low, use the terrain, break formation at my mark. The helicopters dropped altitude, flying dangerously close to the ground, weaving between hills and trees to avoid detection. Then, it happened. Russian surface-to-air missiles launched, streaking through the sky with fiery trails. The battlefield lit up with explosions. But the Ukrainian helicopters didn't fall. Instead, they executed evasive maneuvers so precise, so well-timed, that the missiles missed their mark, exploding harmlessly in the distance. Counterattack from the sky. With the first wave of danger evaded, Ukraine struck back.